Hi, I'm Jennifer and I'm Minimalist My Way. And today we are going to try and make peach jam and can it. So I have my canner right behind me and my peaches, whoops, ready to go to make my jam. I have never done this before, but I thought canning is really back in vogue right now, and I wanted to show everybody how to do it, because it's really not that hard. You just need to know some information and be cautious and follow the directions, and it'll all turn out fine. So join me. So the first thing you have to do is get your ingredients. So the reason why I decided to make peach jam right now is because Kroger had peaches on sale for 89 cents a pound. So I bought all of these peaches. I bought all of these peaches and then 4 more peaches that I have already cut up and put in my first batch of jam. But I bought all 12 peaches for $4.27. So that's the advantage to canning, is when ingredients are cheap and ripe and in season, that's when you make whatever it is you want to make. And here we have my first batch of jars. So I decided to go with the pretty tiny little pint jars. So it's just 1 cup of jam that's going to end up going in each one of these. The recipe that I'm using says that it will make 3 cups, but I'm preparing an extra jar just to be on the safe side, just in case there is some extra. So I got these jars at garage sales. I've been looking for them for the last year or so. I have also bought some new jars, but I thought, why not get them cheap and reuse them if I can. So when I first bought these jars, I washed them thoroughly and put them through the dishwasher. Today, I gave them another wash with soap and water, and then I'm going to sterilize them before I use them as well, just because I'm super nutso about that. I'm recovering from COVID and I'm a little germophobic right now, so you don't always have to sterilize your jars, but why not? So this is a water bath canner. So it basically is a giant pot, and its sole purpose in life is to boil water. So as you can see, it's got a lid, which you will use when you boil water, and it's just this enamel. I'm sure you've seen these at your grandma's house or whatever. Sorry. So that is what a water bath canner is. There are also pressure canners if you want to can things like vegetables, and I am a little wary of those. I've never canned before, so I started with the water bath canner, which just means you boil water. You boil your jars with the substance or the food in it that you're trying to can, and the boiling kills all the bacteria and pushes all the air out, basically. Although I'm not a canning expert, so you're gonna have to do some research too. The big thing about a water bath canner is it has to have this wire rack, and that is what makes the huge difference and what makes it a canner rather than just a giant pot. So with the wire rack, it prevents the glass jars from sitting on the bottom of the pot. And obviously the water is going to be very hot, but the bottom of the pot is going to be even hotter. And if the glass jars sit on the bottom, coming in contact with the bottom of the hot pot while it's boiling, they may break. So the rack keeps them from doing that. Also, you can lift the rack up out of the pot, and you can use these little grooves, and it will sit on the edges of the pot. So you can kind of lift your stuff up and out of the water so that it stops cooking or stops the canning process or the sterilization process, whatever it is you're doing. So I'll show you throughout this process a picture or a video of what that looks like when I'm using that. That's basically the equipment that you need. You need jars, you need lids, you need a canner, and you need a rack. And then you need something to put in the jars. So here is my peach jam. Before it is peach jam. So I'm using a recipe, and when you're canning, it's very important to use a recipe that is a canning recipe. You can't just use your favorite, salsa recipe. It may not be suitable for canning. I'm not super sure what the difference is, but I think there has to be like a balance of sweet and acidity, or like sugar and acidity, for it to can properly. Otherwise, it may not, it may grow bacteria or whatever, and it may not be suitable to eat after you can. So make sure to choose a recipe that is suitable for canning and also gives you the information about how long you're supposed to boil the jar for with this particular recipe, because that's very important and varies for each recipe. So I am using a canning safe recipe for this peach jam. I bought my peaches and cut them up as it said. So this is about 4 peaches cut up into little whatever pieces. And then there's also lemon juice in here, and then sugar. And the recipe just says to boil this and until it thickens, and that's your jam. So we'll see. So here I am filling my canning pot. Do be aware that as you fill it, it is going to get very, very heavy. So maybe have somebody stronger than you help you move it to the stove once it's full. The good news with canning though is you only have to fill it once. Whether you're sanitizing your jars or whether you're processing your jars that already have food in them, the water can be used over and over because you're boiling it. You may have to add water if you process a lot of batches of whatever it is you're cooking, but at least you're not wasting a full giant pot full of water each time. Okay, my pot has been filled, and I also added the jars and the rack because you want to fill your pot full enough to where there's about 1 inch of water over, covering the jars. So if you're using tall jars, you're going to have to put more water in. Mine are relatively short jars today, so this is how much water I'm putting in. But they are down there, submerged in the bottom, and then there's about 1 inch of water covering them. So now I can start the sterilization process. What it looks like when you pull the rack up and out of the pot and then rest it on the sides. So it's resting on the sides. So then it just pulls your jars up and a little bit out of the water. They're still about half submerged, but in this way, if you can pull them out like this, then you can more easily get them out. And I'll show you. This is a little pot lifter that I bought, and what? Oh, it fell over. Sorry, it's hard to do this with one hand. Okay, I don't think I can do it with one hand, but there we go. Okay, so then when if everything's super hot, you can just lift them out of the water like that with your pot lifter. Preferably with 2 hands when you're not filming something. Okay, my jam still looks like peaches to me, but my jam is simmering, so now I'm going to add the spices according to my recipe. So for this recipe, it calls for allspice, cinnamon, and cloves. So I'll be adding those here in just a minute, and then continuing to cook this. I also have my canner overheat, and you do need to be really careful. I'm so used to my cooking pots that have these nice rubber handles so they don't get hot, so you can touch them with your hand. But this is all metal, so I have to remember that if I touch it, it is going to be hot. So, oh, looks like one fell over. That's okay. So it is starting to really get hot. You can see the steam in there, but it's not boiling yet. So to sterilize those jars, I need to boil them for 10 minutes. So while this is cooking, those are sterilizing. All right, just to check in, so my canner is now boiling. So let me put on a glove and show you. But you can definitely tell with the amount of steam that's coming out of it as well. So it is boiling, just looks like a pot of boiling water. There's just the cans, or the jars in there that I am sanitizing right now. And then here is the jam. So I added the spices, and oh my gosh, it smells like fall festival in here. It is awesome. So it's still just simmering. It's been about 15 minutes. And it's kind of breaking down, but I think I'm going to have to end up cooking it for a lot longer than the 20 minutes that was said, the 15 to 20 minutes that was said in the recipe. That may have been because I left the lid on for a little bit because I was worried about the liquid evaporating too quickly, so that might be my fault, but that's what is happening now. Okay, so the 10 minutes have elapsed for my jars to be sanitized. So I took the lid off, I turned the heat off, and the handles of the rack are still sticking up there. So when I'm ready, I will put on some protective handwear and get the jars up and out of the water. But you know, it's not like you can sanitize them too much or boil them too long, so it's not really a time sensitive process after you've reached the minimum amount of time needed. And here are the peaches. I've kind of gone at them a little bit with a potato masher, and because that's what it said to do, and so I just have been kind of mashing at the pieces of peach to make them a little bit more mushy. I'm not super happy with the consistency yet, but I need to remember that it's jam and not jelly. I tasted it. It tastes really good, and it still smells really good. Okay, so my jars are still really warm from when I sterilized them. You can even still see the steam from my canning pot here. This is the pot where my peach jam is. And then I have used, I bought this in a canning set as well, and it is just a funnel, and it'll fit into any canning jar no matter what the size is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the peaches, or the peach jam, I guess, and put it into the jar with the funnel. And you have to be kind of precise, and you have to fill it all the way up. You can't just fill it, you know, like, oh, I have half a jar of this, I'm gonna go ahead and can it. No, it has to be, the recipe will tell you how far to fill it up. So this one, you need to fill it up within 1/4 of an inch of the top. Sorry, me tapping that on the bottom apparently made my dogs think someone was at the door. So you have to fill it really full. So this one, I've got this, there's a measuring thing on the end of this thing which came with the little kit that I bought with my pot lifter and the funnel. So you just need to make sure it's within 1/4 of an inch of the top. It is. And then the other end, you can run it around to try and get like the bubbles out, because you don't really want any bubbles in here. So you kind of just run it around like that. Okay, so that one looks good. Then what we do, whoops, I already moved them over here. You always want to use brand new lids. So I'm not washing these because they're brand new. So they just are the chrome on the one side, or aluminum on one side, and then they've got this sticky red stuff, and that's what's going to seal your jar. So what you want to do is put the lid on, make sure that it's seated well, and then you put, woo, that's still hot. Sorry. And then you put a ring on and you just tighten it fingertip tight. You know, don't really crank down on it, but get it good and tight. And then this is ready to go back into the canner for processing. And what happens during the processing is that you are boiling it, you're heating it up, but it's sealed, but air can still get out. So you're basically just getting all of the air that's trapped in there right now out so that there won't be any air in there, so it won't grow bacteria. And that's why it's shelf stable, and that's why you can then use it. Oops, see, I put a little bit too much. Let me get a spoon. See, I put a little too much in this one. I know it's still gonna be hot. Okay, so I'm just gonna take a little bit out. Take a little bit out. Okay, there we go. Okay, so, and if you happen to get a little, see, now I need to put more back in. If you happen to get a little bit on the edge of the jar like I just did, you definitely will want to wipe that off before you put the lid on, because you don't want anything to keep that lid from making a good solid connection. I'm so sticky. I haven't even touched anything and I'm still really sticky. Or I'm already really sticky. All right, so this one, I still think I'm gonna take just a smidgen out. Okay. All right, so I think that's good. I'm gonna run my guy around here a little bit to get the bubbles out, get everything seated. I'm not gonna slam it on the counter because my dogs will bark. I'm gonna take a wet cloth and just wipe off the edges. Because I don't want anything to get in the way. I'm gonna take my next lid, put it on, put the ring on, put it in the canner. It is ready to go. All right, so I don't know if I have enough for a third jar. This ended up cooking down quite a bit more than what it kind of said in the recipe, but that could be for a lot of different reasons. So if I do have enough to put some in this jar, then that's what we'll use. I'll just put it right in the refrigerator and we'll just use it. And then I will boil this. I'll put the rack with the jars in it down into the bottom of the pot, turn it back on. Once it starts boiling, I'll start the timer, and the recipe says to boil these for 10 minutes or process these for 10 minutes. And so once I get that going, I'll show you what's next. So my first batch of jam is still in the canner and it has not yet started to boil, but I don't know if you can hear the weird noise that it's making. It's almost like a kind of a noise, but it's not boiling yet. But just wanted to be aware that it kind of makes some weird noises when it's got the rack in there and the jars and the food and the lids. Weird sound. Okay, it's boiling. So I just put on my glove and I can check. And it is definitely boiling, and there are my jars with food, food in it. So I've set my timer for 10 minutes. Remember, you don't set your timer until it starts boiling. And I'll just boil it for 10 minutes and they will be done. Okay, the 10 minutes are up, and so I just turned off the heat and took the lid off. So obviously it's still very, very hot, but it is cooling down, and you can kind of see right there, see that bubble? So there's still a little bit of air coming out from the tops of these. Just every now and then there'll be just a little tiny bubble that'll come out. And that's what's gonna happen over the next 12 to 24 hours as well. So what I will do with these is I'll lift them up out of the water. I'll use my jar lifter to just lay them on a towel. So I'll probably just lay them on that towel, or a clean one. And then you don't touch them. You do not touch them or move them for the next 12 to 24 hours. So right now it is about 1 o'clock p.m. So I'm not gonna be up at 1 a.m. hopefully. So tomorrow morning I can look at them and see if they have canned successfully or not. I will show you tomorrow all of the all of the jars that I have canned and how they turned out tomorrow. Right now, I used those while that was processing, and I cut up the rest of my peaches, so I'm gonna do a double batch now that I kind of know how to use the recipe and that it's gonna turn out all right and all of that stuff. So I'm gonna cook up a double batch, sanitize more jars, process the jars once the jam is done, so then tomorrow you'll see lots of jars. Here is my double batch, bubbling away and smelling fantastic. And I decided, because I am processing these for 10 minutes, you technically do not have to sterilize your jars when you do that. So what I did with the second batch of jars is I washed them in the sink, hand washed them with soap and water and rinsed them really, really well. And then I just sat them on the rack in the canning pot that I'd already used that already has hot water in it. So I'm just warming them up that way, and I'm not actually sterilizing them. So I think I'm comfortable with that. I think I'm comfortable with that. We'll see how I feel later on. I can always sterilize them real quick if I want to before I put the food in there for this next batch. But this is also an acceptable method when you're processing things 10 or more minutes. It should sterilize everything anyway. But you do want to warm up your jars in some way before you put the food in, because if you have a freezing cold jar, from the basement, which is where I keep mine, and you put piping hot jam in it, the jar could break. So you do want to warm up your jars in some form or fashion. So I just wanted to show you this is what I'm doing for the second batch. And as a sneak peek, here are my 2 jars from my first batch sitting on their towel, just patiently waiting. They're a little more patient than me. I always want to mess with them, but you're not supposed to. So I'll wait until tomorrow to unscrew the lids and make sure everything's okay. All right, I will see you then. So while the second batch is still cooking, I wanted to try a little bit of the first batch. I had just a little bit that I didn't process, so I'm gonna eat it fresh on a croissant that I had in the house. So it looks really good. It makes it look like a donut, I swear. So let me try it. It is very good. It is very good. I might even put more spices in it the next time, because I think it could be even more cinnamony, because it just really does just taste like mildly sweet peach jam and you don't really get a ton of the spices hitting you in the face. I don't know, after it's processed and after it's in the refrigerator, after it has sat in a jar for quite a while, you know, and then I eat it, the flavors might be more pronounced, but it's good. And you know, I know what's in it, I know who made it, I know where everything came from. It was relatively cheap to do, and so delicious. You can't get anything like this at the store. It is the next day, and magically I have lots of jars. That second double batch, I didn't bake it quite as long or cook it quite as long because I kind of knew what it was going to look like, and it was great. So it looks like it was really funny because all of these were really active after I got them out of the canner. You know, I would be in the other room and I would hear, you know, as they're sucking the lids down, and the buttons would pop in. And what you're supposed to do is take the lids or the rings off and kind of inspect the lids. Make sure you can't pry them off with your fingers or anything like that. Make sure the buttons are all sucked down. And as long as all of that is good, then you can either leave the rings off and just store them that way, or put the rings back on, but they don't really do anything. I mean, it's not gonna like, if that button pops up, that means, you know, that there's no longer an airtight vacuum seal, and the contents would need to be thrown away, is what usually people say, canning experts say. But all of mine seem to have sealed well. None of my jars cracked. You definitely want to look for that as well. You want to look for it, you know, if you were to take a ring off and there would be part of the jam, you know, down the side or coming out from underneath the ring, that would be a bad sign as well. You would not want to store that jar for any length of time. You would want to discard it. But now the only thing left to do is to write on the lids what it is and the date, so that I will know, and then I can just store them in a relatively normal way, just like you would store, you know, a can of peaches that you bought at the store. You could just store them in your pantry or basement or whatever. They do not need to be refrigerated, and they can be eaten up to a year later, and sometimes longer than that. Just use your common sense. They always say if anything smells weird, looks off, if you have a question about anything, don't eat it. Because you know, you realize if one of these seals is broken and you store it in a cool, dark place for a year, things are gonna grow, and you know, bad things would happen if you ate that. But you know, as long as you're using your common sense and everything looks right and you know kind of what to look for, these will stay good, and I will be able to eat fresh peach jam in the middle of the winter, and that is so neat. So I wrote on the lid of each of these what it is and the date. I used a permanent marker, and I don't know if I said this before, I should have, but you're always going to use brand new or never used lids. You are never going to be able to use the lids again once they go through the canning process, because they had that red, you know, layer of, I don't know if it's adhesive or rubber, you know, whatever, and that's what's adhering to the rim of the jars. So that has now been used, so you can never use the lid again. You can use the rings again, and you can use the jars again, but you can't use the lids again. So go ahead and write on the lids, use permanent marker, no big deal, because you're never gonna use those lids again. And now these are ready to be stored. I can give them as gifts if I need to just grab something, and you know, I need a gift for a teacher or for a hostess or a need to bring something to a potluck, or I need to, I have a Secret Santa exchange or something. These kinds of things make great gifts for that kind of thing where you just need something quickly or you need something inexpensive, and it's homemade and it tastes so good and it smells so good, and you'll have these on hand for the next year. It's amazing. So it's been a few days since my peach jam canning journey happened. So I just wanted to reflect a little bit and say a few last words about canning. So canning is a great way to try out new recipes, to save money by batch cooking in season cheap produce and saving it for eating when that produce may be double, triple, quadruple the price. Because it's not in season and has to travel a lot farther. It's great for the environment because, again, you're using in-season produce and you are prolonging the life of that produce, and you are also reusing a lot of materials, whether it be your canning pot, the jars themselves, the rings. You do have to replace the lids each time, but it's something that's been done for a long time, and now it's not really done out of necessity, but it's done for fun and to just feel more connected with the food that we're eating. And I've definitely found that to be true. I'm a very novice canner. I've actually only done it 3 times with just 2 different recipes, but I'm having so much fun. That being said, canning is not for the faint of heart, I guess. That canning stock pot is heavy when it is filled with water. I actually ended up having my husband empty mine after I was all done canning for the day because I was more tired than I was in the morning, and I'm like, I don't think I can lift this thing to the sink and control, the dumping the excess water out of it. So it is very heavy. I was super sticky the whole day. My wrist really hurt from chopping up all of those peaches. And then also I was kind of chopping them in the pot itself, while I was cooking the jam and making the jam. It's intensive, and it takes some strength, and it takes some time. I probably spent, I went between going to the grocery store and buying the peaches and then washing them, cutting them, making the 2 batches of the recipe of the jam that I did, and then running 2 sessions of canning. I could have done them all in one, but I didn't because I needed to make sure it would turn out right. You're probably talking at least 4 hours, and that's a big chunk of time. So just keep that in mind before you jump in. Also, please don't make this video the only thing you watch and research when it comes to canning. Like I said, I am a novice myself, so I prepared a lot before I canned my first thing. I made sure I had all of the right equipment that I needed. I made sure that I had recipes that were appropriate for canning. I made sure that I knew how much headspace to leave at the top of the jars for each recipe. I made sure I knew how to sterilize my jars, and I made sure that I knew how long to process them in the water bath canner according to the recipe. There are a lot of different resources that you can look at. I watched a lot of videos on YouTube of other people doing water bath canning. I went to the library and I checked out a lot of books from a lot of different sources on how to do water bath canning, and also how to, they contain some recipes as well. And I actually scanned a lot of the pages in some of these books, and that's what I saved and referred to later with both instructions on how to can and then recipes on how to can as well. So do your research, make sure you know what you're doing. And above all, if anything looks weird, things are squirting out, you know, or lids are coming off or anything like that, please don't eat that particular jar, especially if it has sat for a long time, because there may be bacteria or something that has grown in there that made the lid pop, or made, you know, it just wasn't done correctly, or something happened that was fluky. So don't eat anything that you think might have a chance of even have gone bad. The other caution that I need to let you know of, and you saw in my kitchen, I have a gas stove. So it has the flame that you can see, and then it has the iron grates that go above it. And then you put the water bath canner directly onto the grates, and then the flame is right there. If you have an electric stove that is a smooth glass top one, like one of the new ones, you know, where you can just run your hand across the whole stove and it's completely flat because it's glass and it's electric, there have been issues with canning on those. In the worst scenarios, the glass cooktops have actually shattered or broken or cracked, and you do not want to break your stove to make some stupid peach jam. You know, so if you have an electric glass top stove, do your research and proceed with caution. Some people, it works just fine. Other people, again, you can break your stove, and you can also not be able to can successfully if your stove has like an automatic shutoff, if the glass cooktop gets too hot. Because you saw mine, you've got to get that huge pot filled with water to boil for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever the recipe calls for. That takes a lot of heat. And luckily, you know, I have a fan above, and then at one point my fan on my oven even came on, and mine's gas. So I mean, there's a lot of heat produced. And so if you've got an oven or a stove like that has an automatic shutoff, you could think that you've gotten your water to boil and it's boiling the entire time, but that might not be the case if it shuts off automatically and then starts once it cools off. You may not even realize that's happening. So just beware of that. And thank you for joining me for my water bath canning peach jam jamboree. As always, if you would like and subscribe to my channel for other videos like this. We talk about minimalism, frugal living, and lots of other things, just to make you enjoy life and live better with less. And as usual, be minimalist your way.